Welcome to the season finale of Five Things. It is a very special season finale because it is the Scene Snobs takeover. That's right. Not only do we have Mick Manhattan as our special guest host. Hey, Mick, what's up?
What's going on, man? How are you doing? I'm so happy to be here this season helping out. Like, I really enjoyed all my time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. A lot of fun episodes that we had this season, which you were part of it. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
now what we had talked about is we wanted to do some Scene Snobs fun with another show this year. So we didn't get a chance to do that, but let's have that takeover. So today we're talking about five forgotten albums from the 90s that you should check out. And it is with Mick's co host on the Scene Snobs, who we'll introduce in just a minute.
I am inevitable.
I will say that he's the perfect person for this. He knows his music. He's the music guy.
Cool, cool. So, as mentioned, with us today is Casey the Madman.
We're taking over!
Welcome to the Season Podcast.
Hello!
Welcome.
This is so exciting. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to finally be here in virtual person with you. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'm excited for this episode here. It's not really Nerd Box. It's going to be more Scene Snobs than it is the Nerd Box. So I'm wondering where this journey is going to take me.
It's so odd being a host of something and not having him be the other host.
Right?
I have to treat him like a guest now. What is this?
I'm very excited about it. It means I'm more important than you right now.
It's true. I mean, that's the case on our show.
Easy. Pump the brakes. You magnificent human, you. Don't you dare get down on yourself. You're doing great.
Thanks, buddy.
So, Casey, what do you want to plug? Go ahead and tell us about the Scene Snobs or anything else that you want to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, I am one half of the Scene Snobs, and normally when I do this pitch, I don't actually have my other half here. But oddly enough, I'm lucky enough to be joining the better half of the Scene Snobs, Mr. Mick Manhattan. We have a live show every Tuesday night at 9 p.m., which is the flagship, if you will. We also have Geek Fest Live on Sunday nights between 9 and 10 p.m., which is an absolute riot of all the conversations we didn't get to have on Tuesday. So it's always fun. And you should check out our YouTube channel and go to thescenesnobs.com where you can see us on any and all of your major podcasting stations. Make sure to rate and review us, and we love and appreciate you for checking us out. Goodness, man. Yeah, this is exciting. So yes, forgotten sound albums. It's so great. Forgotten albums. Yes.
I can't wait to get to my number 5 because now I'm curious to see if you have ever heard of them. And I have a slightest idea. I think that you may have if you're really into music, especially from the 90s.
I mean, I was a huge fan. I remember being trapped into my Refreshments album. Like that song, that album, I could not get enough of. I mean, the cover of it, just everything exploded in my face. So that was a good start to the 90s and the way my memory kicked off when you brought this up to us. And I was like, all right. And then I dug deeper and deeper and realized it's a Scene Snobs takeover.
It is.
So I decided to put a little spin to it. So I'm excited to see how you guys think this all works out.
So,
all right. So if you're new to the 5 things, how it works is we go round robin style. We go from 5 all the way up to 1, and we start with our guest. So Casey, what is your number 5?
So my number 5, starting off here at the Scene Snobs takeover, the Cruel Intentions soundtrack.
Ooh.
A 1999 album that was absolutely fantastic. One of my personal favorites. That songs by Placebo, Fatboy Slim, and Blur managed to really push and throw those in the forefront. This is a fantastic selection of basically wrapping up the 90s. This is how the 90s finished. Counting Crows were huge. We have Marcy Playground. One of my personal favorites, Skunk Anansi, who I wanted to use one of their albums, but I realized that Secretly is just a much better song. So that's very strong in there. We also have a little Amy Mann for anyone who was unaware of her. She was big in the mid 90s, even early 90s. She was very big songstress, fantastic voice. So it's kind of nice to have her wrap up the 90s in that style. So this, and of course, the Verve, Bittersweet Symphony, a song that is just trapped in all of our heads.
That's the movie that made it famous.
So the Forgotten Art of the soundtrack, Cruel Intentions, is my number 5.
I'm so glad you did that. I almost picked Cruel Intentions, but I won't. I only added one soundtrack because I was like, all right, I'm a movie guy. I'm not the music guy. You're the music guy, and I knew you guys were really going to be into this. I just picked albums that I liked that I don't think a lot of people remember or know. But I was like, there's one soundtrack going on there, and Cruel Intentions is almost it. But if you don't have another soundtrack on your list, I guarantee you would have put this on there.
Okay.
Nice.
But that's my number 1, so we'll find out when we get there.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
I have to say, man, soundtracks were just on another level in the 90s.
They really were. Yep.
Yeah.
You had the songs almost written for the movies. You had, people were a lot more engaged in these. And that's one of the things we've lost nowadays is those soundtracks for the movies. I think that was such a staple for so long. And the 90s was really the pinnacle, if not the last run of it. So they have been forgotten. And it's also, we're short attention span nowadays. Just getting a sampling of each song of people we loved in the 90s. That's perfect. Soundtrack's perfect.
Yeah.
100%.
That's a good pick. You know why? Because I forgot about it. When I think of soundtracks, I think of other ones. And that one doesn't pop out at me.
So for their second album following up Vivid, I went with Living Color, Time's Up. I like their follow-up, and I think it's a lot of people don't talk about it as much because everybody goes over Cult of Personality, especially after What's His Nuts in Wrestling. But you forget the songs that were on that album: Tag Team Partners, Elvis is Dead, the New Jack theme. Like there was a bunch of really good. Time's Up itself is a really good song, and I just think Living Color is a band that people sleep on. Like you're either a fan of them or you have no idea who they are, other than Cult of Personality. So yeah, I didn't want to go with Vivid because Vivid's 88 and we're doing 90s. But Time's Up is definitely a good follow-up.
Yeah, strong.
Yeah, definitely. I never really got into them that much, and I'm one of those guys who follows What's His Nuts, and I'm like, yeah. Anytime that song comes on now, it just means a lot more.
Yep. Oh, What's His Nuts?
It is their self-titled debut in 1994. It is Curb Dog.
No.
So they came out when grunge broke. Pretty gnarly guitars, a lot of crunch to it. Very good album. They had songs like End of Green, Dry Riser, Dead Anyway. The album I found them on our college radio station, and then I just couldn't get away from them because I went and bought the album out and I just listened to it on rotation for weeks on end. And in fact, when I was creating this list, I was like, man, I haven't listened to them in a long time. I got to go and rediscover them because it's just such a great band.
That's awesome. All right, so they're on the list. Curb Dog?
Curb Dog with a K.
And they're from Ireland too, so.
Ooh.
Yeah,
that's definitely they had grunge there since that's the only thing that Europe ever had before America. It's grunge.
Yes. Yeah. This one was pretty easy for me for number 4, and that was Wayne's World. Wayne's World soundtrack was absolutely fantastic. One of my favorites, with, of course, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody being, the absolute tour de force. The reason we all remember Wayne's World and love Wayne's World is because of that amazing headbanging sequence. So it's great to have that in there. But we're also looking at the 90s, and this is an early 90s. This is 92, so it pales to the 99 side. But this still has your Alice Cooper, Eric Clapton, Tia Carrera. Come on. She was fantastic. She was great and a songstress for a little bit. So that was exciting. Black Sabbath, Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's loaded to the gills with just good old-fashioned classic rock, and showed really in the 90s how we started it. That was the new era being ushered in. Grunge was, pushing away the hair rock, and all the old classics were pushing in. to all of our hearts through this movie.
I think I misunderstood the assignment.
No, I'm twisting the assignment.
Yeah.
Because these are like essential listening.
Soundtracks are forgotten. Period. Dot. They just aren't done anymore. People have forgotten how they were, and it's always a wonderful reminder to go through and be like, oh yeah, this song. And you do that a lot more in soundtracks, at least I have in my life, than I have, through full albums.
That's an excellent soundtrack. In fact, that's how I actually discovered Queen, was through
Awesome.
Wayne's World. Yep.
Yep. I mean, I was similar because I had seen the music video maybe a year before at 6:30 in the morning when I secretly snuck out and my parents were paying attention. I was able to turn on MTV real quick and be like, I got a music video, and it was Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
So
From 1992. Not common at the time. It was Common Sense. Can I Borrow a Dollar? It was one of his very early albums. Some great music on there. Listen to Charm Alarm. What are 2 Scoops of Raisins was pretty good. Tricks Up My Sleeve. There's just a bunch of fun songs on there. Common, even in early days when he was Common Sense, just had a good vibe and flow to him. Yeah, I mean, he still does, but he doesn't do it as much anymore. Like in the early days, those were the salad days. You knew you were getting something. Blow to the Temple. Oh my God. My brothers would listen to that all the time.
I have not heard that album, but anything when it comes to hip hop and rap from that decade too is just on another level.
Mm-hmm.
So hearing that, I'm going to have to go check out that album to hear it, because I love rap and hip hop from that time period, because it was more raw, and the beats behind it, and it was just a lot better.
Absolutely. I mean, you get like Nas, you got Wu-Tang, you've got just some incredible talents that are coming out of there. I mean, also Mos Def, fantastic lyricist, the wordsmithing that they did, and it was just so wonderful back then. And it's definitely a lost art.
Stop smarting up my choices.
We're gonna get to some of the bigger names on my list, because they have albums that they're known for, but they have albums that were forgotten. And the first one is R.E.M's Monster. The stations that I listen to, either on satellite radio or just locally here, never really play anything. Occasionally, you'll hear what's the frequency Kennedy played. Maybe once in a blue moon, but there's Bang and Blame on there. There's Crush with Eyeliner. That album is so damn good, and I actually think it's on the level, if not better than Automatic for the People, the album that came out before.
I think it's better. I think that's a really awesome choice. I think it was a better album. They were more mature. I really love the maturity of Stipe and the way he just hammers all of his, like everybody was just hitting it perfectly too. There's nothing better than a good, clean band that's hitting everything perfectly. You can tell those are the lyrics they want to say. They're getting their message out. They're doing what they want to do. And they did that perfectly with that album. Way better than any other. So that's a great choice. It's awesome. I am looking at 1994's The Crow soundtrack.
Oh, yes.
Soundtracks all day long.
It's forgotten. And this one with such wonderful names like The Cure, Rage Against the Machine, 9 Inch Nails. We've got Violent Femmes, the Rollins Band, Helmet, always one of my favorites, Pantera, a band you cannot do anything but rock to. This one actually really showed a lot of the 90s, what the rock era was coming out with, what we were moving out of from the late 80s in, past grunge, no longer with a hair band, but now this was the new rock. And 94 really showcased this, which is why The Crow is a staple in so many people who wear black eyeliner. It's just absolutely a movie you have to commit to. And this is the music of that. So it just opened up doors for me, and it was forgotten. Because even going through soundtracks, I was like, oh yeah, The Crow. I love this movie, love this album, forgot about it. So this was absolutely my number 3. It was one of my favorites. And I know a lot of people will attest that this is what opened up their lives to all this music as well.
I have to say that that's probably one of the best, if not the best soundtracks that ever was released. And even for the second movie was very close to, but yeah, this is just an amazing album with everybody that you've said on it. It's just hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, and you get really this is the shine of all of these bands too. This is really prime of these bands. It wasn't before, it wasn't after. This isn't first album stuff. This isn't later in their careers. This is what these bands were at the time, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And that movie had such buzz too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. I mean, there's a lot of memories come back with that Crow. You know, that movie, that was like one of the first times you hear of like an actor dying. For me, I was like 11, you know, so it was wild.
Listen, there's nobody in the 90s growing up who didn't love The Crow, especially considering he died, because that was such a huge buzz for the movie. I hate to say it that way, but it was like, I mean, more and more people wanted to go and see it. Just who didn't know who The Crow was going in. They're like, we got to rush. We got to see this dude die. Unfortunately, it's just kind of how it works. The 90s were a weird beast. Like, I think that Alec Baldwin movie now would be. Yeah, The Crows were good. The soundtrack is amazing. I think the soundtrack's better than the movie, personally.
I'll agree with that.
I do like the movie a lot. As I got older, I was like, oh, it's a good movie, but it was a very stylized movie. But yeah, no, I think the soundtrack is still on point. That's a great pick.
Yeah, with that movie too, again, the best way to see if it's really as good as we remembered it is if you introduce it to your kids and see if they like the film. And if they come around, it's like, yeah, you know what, that was really good. It's like, yeah, then it was good. It wasn't all buzz.
Yeah.
Metallica's Load from '96.
Oh, good.
Listen, anybody can talk as much shit about Metallica as they want, but I'll always take them. And that was a good album. Yeah, I think it's very underrated for what it is. I'm not gonna say it's one of their best or a great album, but it has some really good songs. King Nothing alone really elevated that. Wasting My Hate. It was a fun album, and I don't understand. And well, I kind of get it because it was the '90s, it was kind of after their prime. But yeah, I think it's a good one that kind of should be in their upper echelon of albums.
I think if you really think about it for our age, right, that was really our first introduction to everybody just hating on something.
Yeah.
When something was dropped. Like now it's normal. Back then it was like, what? This is actually a really good album. Oh, well, it's not like they're... So what? They got to evolve, right? They got to change and grow. And that's what they did. That's how they stay relevant.
Exactly. I hear people talking about Saint Anger now, like they like it. I'm just like, I liked it. And I remember catching hate for it.
Yeah. A lot of people pandered to those. They didn't like them.
Yeah.
And it was really strange getting that first level of hate. That was the first time we experienced that because everyone was like, well, it's not the old version or it's not this other thing. And it's like, when did we ever stop liking bands because they change? They're bands. They're just doing what they're going to do.
That was the album that they cut their hair to as well. And everybody's like, oh my God, they cut their hair. They're not the same. They sold out. It's like, no, they didn't.
I was like, did you listen to King Nothing? It sounds exactly the same as everything else they've ever done.
Well, we're going to stay in the thrash metal area. So we're going to go with Anthrax, Sound of White Noise.
Yeah.
So that album doesn't get talked about enough as it did. And that has just some great songs on there. It has 1,000 Points of Hate. It has Potter's Field on there. It's just such a heavy album. From the intro to the ending it's a musical experience.
It really is. And it's absolute hardcore, which is beautiful because it's one of the few hardcore bands and albums that made it as far as they did and made them as big as they were. And they're still not huge by any stretch. It's in our, group of them. They're huge. Anthrax is amazing. And Scott Ian is so good. He's so cool.
Oh yeah, definitely.
He was the first personality I remember seeing from the rock genre and went, oh, that guy, what does he do? I want to listen to what he does. Number 2, this was a really hard one for me because I have 2 that I love here, but I had to break down and change it a little bit. So my number 2 is actually the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. A movie put out by Baz Luhrmann in 1996. The amazing Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes. So I figured if I wasn't going to do the Titanic soundtrack, because it's really only got one song, then I figured I'd go with this one because we have Garbage, we have Everclear, we have 1 Inch Punch. So this is a bunch of Butthole Surfers. I said butthole. It's one of my favorite albums because it also has, this is more the alt rock side of the 90s, which is what I definitely identified with in the 90s. The 90s had this huge subgenre of rock called alt rock, and it encompassed so many different things and so many different sounds and styles. And I love that this album really brought that to the forefront and was able to play with a lot of different styles and, you know, still wildly successful. I love listening to the Cardigans. Who doesn't put on Love Fool every once in a while on a nice sunny day, right? So that's my number 2.
Damn it, Casey. I love them. I love your choices. And the fact that they're all, it annoys me because when I was putting this list together, I'm like, maybe I'll just do all soundtracks because they have all my favorite songs. I was like, no, Dave's going to get mad at me.
It's Scene Snobs Takeover.
My number 2 is one of my favorite hip hop groups of all time. They didn't become more popular. This was their first album in '98. Their second album was what propelled them to even higher fame. And a lot of people, they're so underrated, don't even know who they are. And the album is Jurassic V by the group Jurassic V.
Awesome.
Oh,
yeah.
I will just give you I don't know if you'll be able to tie, but they are tied to my number 1. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. All right.
Awesome.
I'm so glad because I know Casey knows who they are, but I'm glad you do too, Dave. Yeah, Jurassic V is like one of my favorites. I love it. I love them. I've seen them live a few times, and every time it's been fantastic. So Quality Control is one of their songs on their first album, which is their biggest hit. Blacktop Beat, without a doubt. Jayu was another good one. There's some really good ones on that first album that really, like, you see why they became as big as they did for underground hip hop.
They are the first act that I ever seen live.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Dude, that's awesome.
Not a forgotten band, but this album is. And it was kind of like an experimental album from it. It was Stone Temple Pilots' Tiny Music from the Vatican Gift Shop. It was their third album. It came out in '96 and was just so different from anything else that they ever put out. But it's so damn good. It had Big Bang Baby. It had Lady Picture Show, Art School Girl, and occasionally you'll hear Lady Picture Show on the radio. Occasionally, once in a blue moon. But I love that album. I think it's my favorite of all of the albums that they put out.
Nice. I'd agree with that. It's an amazing album. I mean, Lady Picture Show was one of my favorite STP songs because it was really Scott Weiland. Once again, that embracing of where he was artistically, who he was as a band. They did such a great job. And that was right before he had stopped being clean again, like, you know, fell off the wagon again. So that album was a clean him, and it was amazing. So
yeah, I think he had full control of everything that they did because it was so different.
Yeah. Awesome choice, man.
Yeah, really
Thank you.
This has been so cool. I'm like remembering all of these great old albums. It's wonderful, and experiences, and it's cool.
I love when something comes back to you, you hear somebody talk about a song or an album, and you go right back to when you heard it. And it's just like, it feels so good.
All right, here we go. Everyone be very excited because this is one of my least favorite movies. And you can find out by watching us in the Scene Snobs how much I despise this movie because of what it did to one of my favorite franchises. But the Batman Forever soundtrack is amazing. This one is a great one. Now, the one song you will hear, obviously, Seal's Kiss from a Rose. But I was just cruising through, and I had my Pandora on the other day, and Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me by U2 came on. And I was like, I recall this being on, this was on a soundtrack. I couldn't remember where. And I was mind-boggled to find out it was, in fact, the Batman Forever soundtrack. I then went back and played this, which has The Flaming Lips, one of my favorite bands. It's got Mazzy Star, another one of my favorite bands, who was also on the Cruel Intentions soundtrack, so double up on Mazzy. A Brandy song, PJ Harvey. It's just so many. Oh, Massive Attack, one of my absolute favorite bands as well. They had Mezzanine in the 90s, which was one of the biggest albums. But yeah, so Batman Forever, and that was being 1995. That was a really influential time for me because that was when I could make up my mind that I don't think I like this movie. but
Mhm.
all the
Yeah.
music was stuff I wanted to immediately find and listen to.
Yep.
So that was kind of that reminder, that moment where it took me back, just exactly like you'd said previously there, David,
Mhm.
is that it brought me back to that moment and to that feeling and that, oh, wow, it was such a cool moment and experience. And to have that again. So Batman Forever, absolutely for me, made 1995 worthy.
I think you two
That's the
may
only
have had the best song on that soundtrack.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is
The video was great for it.
it was really cool.
The Can't Hardly Wait soundtrack from '98.
Oh, good one.
It's such a great album. It's
Yeah, it
so
is.
good. It's the perfect mixtape of the '90s, in my opinion. It has so many great things. You got Guns N' Roses on there, Dog's Eye View, Black Lab. They do play Run DMC, which is an '80s song. It's tricky, but that's all right. Parliament, Blink 182, Busta Rhymes, Missy Elliott, Third Eye Blind. Like, I mean, come on. This is the '90s incarnate. Like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
That's valid. I think you won. I think you won. That is absolutely, as far as you just blew my soundtrack list out because I forgot about one of my favorite albums that everyone else when I bring up to forgets. So you meta'd so hard, bro.
Here's the thing, like Casey went all soundtracks. That was his theme. That's why he did it.
Yep.
I can tell. He did not talk to me about this. I'm finding out all of these songs at the same time as you, Dave. The 80s and 90s were perfect for mixtape soundtracks.
Agreed.
And you're right, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Honestly, I think what kind of killed it was it Scream 2 or Scream 3, the soundtrack that came out?
Mhm.
And it was a compilation, but it was a poor compilation of what we were getting. So it's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Wait,
Creed,
and then like
yeah,
Scream 3's Creed song.
Yeah, the Creed
Yeah.
song. That's
Yeah.
I always go back to that one and I'm like, ugh, because that music
I-
video, and I was like, you're better than this. You're
I
better
feel
than
like
this.
I feel like every episode that I'm on Five Things, Scream gets mentioned.
And you should. Why not?
All right, so my number one is tied to Jurassic V, and it was the first concert that I ever seen. So it was actually a Valentine's Day gift from my wife. It's Fiona Apple's Title from 1996, her debut album.
Wow.
Such great music on there. Sullen Girl, Criminal, Shadow Boxer. Her influence is felt today in like Alicia Keys and Billie Eilish and Adele, right?
Meg
There
Myers.
was nobody else out there like her. And the stuff that she sang about was so deep because I don't know if anybody's aware of it. She was raped when she was younger, and she put her heart out in that album to get through it. And that's what a lot of her albums were. If she was experiencing something emotionally, it would come out in her music. And it was just a wild ride to listen to her stuff. That is my number one. She's actually in my top 3 favorites.
Wow.
Nice.
That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. I mean, that album was fantastic. That is such
Yeah.
a great pick because, and it is forgotten because that so many people have come from that. And now
Mhm.
so many, young artists have come up and we've grown and watched them grow up and go through these things and they've done it, put it on their albums. Like everyone wants to talk about the Taylor Swift and no disrespect to Tay Tay, but with all due respect, Fiona Apple was way ahead of her time. People were not ready to have those conversations, and her throwing it out there in a bigger way, in a sexier way, in a sultry way, grabbing everyone's attention with it, and then going, by the way, this isn't good. Like,
Yep.
that was awesome. Being able to feel those emotions. I was always a fan of Jules' poetry. She was great for that. You
Yeah.
know, there were a lot of women out there who started that these artists really got their voices and they did such a fantastic job exposing themselves. And that was such a great album for that. So awesome choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 All right. So you've heard all of our picks. What is on your list? And don't say I don't listen to 90s music and I listen to today's stuff because you're really depriving yourself of some really quality music that's out there. So you definitely want to go back and take a look at this. And I would say start with the soundtracks because that's where you get the best variety of all of these artists that came up and what was coming out then, and then expand into those individual artists.
I love it. That's a fantastic way to start. And everybody who hasn't listened to 90s music, your ears will be blown off. Your socks will be blown off. You'll go, yeah, but we hear this stuff today. It's like, right. But it started here. And it's always
Yes.
nice to know where things began so you can see how much it's grown. So you can understand the art a little better. And some amazing artists that, maybe listening to Bjork yodel is interesting to you. Cool.
Pop a pair of Jankos on, a good old flannel. Get yourself a Surge, hang out, and listen to these albums all the way through.
All right, and as everybody knows, later in this week will be our honorable mentions. So we'll see you then. But before we go, Casey, anything that you want to plug before we head out?
Just try to check us out at thescenesnobs.com. It's a pleasure to hang out, and hopefully we can entertain you and bring some joy to your life in this otherwise crazy time and world that we live in. We appreciate you. We think you're amazing. I'm so grateful for being able to be on the show tonight. And thank you so much for listening. And just make sure that you're kind to yourself. Take care of each other. Be cool.
Yeah. So since this is the season finale, Mick, I have to thank you very much for jumping on and assisting with co-hosting duties.
Thanks for having me.
Since Casey plugged it already, anything that you want to add in addition to that?
No, I mean, we have some fun stuff coming up. So just, like you said, just go check us out. Like, we're always doing some great things, and, let us know what you think.
All right. And as usual, remember, like this video, right? Don't just watch it, like it, because it helps expand the audience that has access to seeing this video. And then swing over to the Scene Snobs and subscribe to their channel and like their videos as well, because what is it all about, right? We talked about the 90s. 90s was big for what? Independent films. That's where that came up. And now we're independent podcasters. So join the new wave that's out there. Support the indies. And until the next episode, see you.